are all set. But that said, I didn't want to bring it into your beautiful state. So
we would have gut shot you at the border. So good luck. Have fun with this class, and we'll have questions afterwards. I'll turn my mic off. Bye.
Sounds good. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is actually the forecasting of emerging technologies. And David changed the talk up a little bit this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about the network approach that we use to do it, and maybe get into the details. At the end of the talk, just for good of the order in the country, I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about patent law. I'm a patent attorney, a partner in one of the major firms in the country. And so it's one of those kind of things you need to know that I wish somebody told me earlier in my career. So a little bit of a background, was actually doing some work for some folks at the National Academy of Sciences, and was sitting in a meeting, and they were talking about how do we detect, how do we prevent surprise for the warfighter, and what are things that we can do to try to keep our people safe. This was maybe 12 years ago at the time. And I said, well, I'm a patent attorney. I know a good one when I see it. The patent office knows good ones when they see it. They behave a little bit differently. I wonder if there's some tells in the data that we could use to be able to determine whether something is important and emerging. At the time, they had a bunch of professors from Harvard and Stanford and all sorts of folks who were talking about, well, we'll just ask our graduate students to do it. And I'm shaking my head saying, I was a graduate student, and I don't think the things that I was producing was necessarily the best in the country. So came across Approach and actually got asked back to give a presentation at the National Academy on what we've got here, and then got drafted by the RAND Corporation, which is a nonprofit, basically science advisory board to the folks in the federal government to hopefully try to keep them out of trouble whenever we can and get, washed through the noise. So one of the things I'm going to start off with, as I mentioned, is I'm going to talk a little bit about complex systems. When we get down to it, I'm sure many of the things that you've discussed already this term relates to complex systems and the interactions of different components with respect to each other. Your class has probably had food web, if you've got engineers in here, the power grid, the cell, road networks, and then of course social media and technologies. And one of the things that I had observed when I was a patent attorney early in my practice was, boy, these engineers and scientists keep coming back to the same types of areas to determine what's new. And I recall when I was an engineer designing airbags, I remember listening to NPR, and they were talking about magnetorestrictive sensors, this new thing. And by the end of the day, I had designs pulled together on how we were going to be able to use this to try to train or to look for occupants within the vehicles so we can disable airbags when there were children in there. And so the science of complex networks and systems, we'll talk a little bit about them, has changed a little bit over the past couple of years when I first started playing with these things. First of all, they started off kind of characterizing static networks. That was, boy, the food web is a network. And then they started looking, well, what ends up happening when things are characterized in the dynamic network? And this may be, Dave's talks on amino acids and how they're used in the cells and recycled and these types of things. The next thing that came out about 2014, 2015 was discussions about originally how to control these networks and how you may be able to affect the power grid. And now what we're looking at and actually at RAND Corporation, this is one of the things I'm working on right now, is using decision-making under deep uncertainty. And basically this is adding probabilistic decision-making and things like this when we're talking about what's happening in the network. You've got imperfect coin flips when we talk about information traveling through the network, and can we take a look at what's happening in cascading failures. So I'm going to actually challenge Dave a little bit. This happens to be, and hopefully, or Duncan, somebody, This happens to be a Google trend that's fairly repeatable. And Duncan or Dave, can you give me a guess as to what you think this is? This is actually a yearly phenomena. Can one of you answer? Okay, sounds like we don't. Does anybody have a guess what this is?
I'm gonna guess flu.
So actually, this is the Google Trends for the word pumpkin spice with respect
What's
to
that?
Latin through the years. And it's kind of amazing if you think about it and you look at the shapes of those curves. One of the things we need to do as engineers and scientists is take a look to see patterns and figure out what the heck is happening, right? You know, I think we can probably attribute most of this to Starbucks and all of the rest of that. But, you know, is that spike at the end of any one of these given upticks, everybody's saying, I hate pumpkin spice, and so people decide to take it off the market? I don't know. But it's just amazing how repeatable this is. And this is actually the point I'm going to is when we talk about networks, one of the things we need to talk about, you know, is the structures of these networks. And I'm not too, forgive me if you guys have gone through this, but we talk about structures of networks in terms of nodes, which are the dots, and edges, which are the lines in between them. On the left is a particular network we'll discuss in a little bit. The thicknesses of the lines are how relatively close two of these, you know, in terminologies, two of these different edges or nodes are. Each dot in this particular network that I use to do the forecasting for science and technology for the government and actually my clients represents different technologies. And so what we see is when you've got an improvement in one area, engineers and scientists are going to look to another area, and that information is going to flow. So one of the things that is now obviously becoming very important to the whole economy, right, is collapses in networks. And what we see on the right, so this is the British supply network for power in England. And so one of the things that this article in, you know, Physics of Condensed Matter showed is by just making small tweaks in the network, either adding a link or crossing out a link, you can cause extensive cascading failures. And I think, you know, if I had to sum up 2020, we've had a whole series of these jolts to the system that are kind of causing cascading failures out. And one of the things we're looking at RAND is, okay, what are the types of things we need to do to try to get the economy and things like that jump started again? Okay, so just a little bit about system collapse. One of the things that we look at, this happens to be a Food Web, you know, article, but it really helps to think about these networks and these complex systems as we're working with them. You know, we've got local minimums when, you know, we may be going into a recession and then things come out and you start to come back up. Or, you know, at Mount St. Helens when when the volcano exploded, you know, how quickly and how long does things take to come back? And what are the types of things that you can do to add energy into the system to bring things back to, right? Do we do overseeding or some of the things that Dave does with respect to pathogens? All of these are complex systems, and it really doesn't matter what your major is. This is really the way you need to take and approach your job going forward and how you need to apply it. And one of the things that you're going to see is if we go to the network a little bit and discuss this, your comrades and competitors are really going to be looking in the same area. And to be innovative, you really need to look outside of your area. You need to feel comfortable, you know, looking and seeing what's happening in areas. And that's just, you've got to keep, you know, if your job is really going to be to innovate, that's really how you're going to be able to bring the most value to the people that you're working for, or even yourself if you decide to do it, is to continue to innovate, look at areas, look what's emerging, and see if you can figure out how to take and apply those new things into your area. Just a brief note on complex systems and control. This work all comes from a really smart guy by the name of Barabasi. If you think about a network similar to a bunch of pool balls held together with springs. If you get too many pool balls held together with springs, it's very difficult to shake a few of the balls to go through and control the entire network. Barabasi actually came up with a way to characterize networks and inputs into these networks to show you can control an entire network by just grabbing a minimum number of balls, and how these balls are connected really depends. And it's the same with whether it's happening within a cell or whether it's happening in the power grid. Just as a whim, I actually took the European power grid and was able to figure out where the control nodes were within that grid to be able to affect it, either adversely or and it was actually pretty simple. One of the things, the math here is not too hard. It's just really linear algebra that you need to do. There's a gentleman by the name of Newman who's got a great book on this that works at that'll get you started on networks. But one of the things that Barabasi had in his control papers, and the thing that really lit me up when I saw this, I just kind of bumped into it a number of years ago, is if you take a look at the graphs in the lower right-hand corner, you kind of see that what happens is as things change within the networks, and this happens to be degrees and how things are linked up, you end up getting a split or a bifurcation in the way that the networks behave. And this behavior is very, very similar to what we see in magnetics. I'm a materials engineer. When we see in some of these semiconductors, when you get a phase transformation, either in a metal or in the state of a electron spin, or actually if we do some of these other things. And once you start to see these types of patterns, then you go, wow, something's really happening here. So, it's really your job to try to take a look at patterns. And these patterns are what I ended up looking for and finding at the Patent Office data to help do the foresight. So this particular graph right here is a graph that's, maybe 11 years old now. This is the emergence of a particular technology that's all near and dear to all of us right now. And what we see is a logistic graph and the number of issued patents in this specific technology. The little Nautilus insets that we see, and I'm sorry I don't have a description here right now, is actually the spread of this particular technology through the economy. And so on the left-hand side, these things were rather big and would be used to steer ships around. This is actually the logistic curve for GPS. And as I like to say, I couldn't fake a better S-curve, right? That's just, and on the left, you were using it to steer big ships around. And on the right, in the upper right, you can see GPS is in tennis shoes and backpacks and dog collars, and the Patent Office isn't giving any more patents away for GPS. Okay, this is a standard curve that we see, and we see that this is how we see growth in publication terms and topics within publications. And the goal here for us is to try to determine what's emerging and what's growing and what's going to be important. Now, these are human systems. The noise, I'm sorry, the data is rather noisy sometimes, and we don't always get this nice pretty curve that we see it. Because really, when we're talking about patent applications or publications, we're talking about a bet. So whether it's a graduate student in Dr. Sands' laboratory who wants to do some research, they're making a bet that their time spent is going to affect the level of nature, or hopefully they're going to be able to change the world to make it a better place. With respect to patents, you've got individuals and organizations paying an overpriced patent lawyer like myself to file some papers to see if they can get a monopoly in an area. And because they're spending money, they're placing bets in these areas, they've got to take and apply their technologies appropriately and prudently. And so by looking where people are applying these bets, it's just like crowdsourcing. We can really see what types of things are important going forward and what are they going to be important. These networks that we have are really pretty stable. That's the network on the right. It doesn't change very much. And because the thicknesses of the lines are known, once we see an emergence in a new technology area, we can track it out and say, okay, this is magnetorestrictive sensors. Where are types of things that we can apply it? Where are engineers in Detroit applying sensors right now? Oh, airbags. Okay, right. And so eventually those magnetorestrictive sensors we're going to get through Brownian motion over into detecting child seats, or whether somebody is up against an airbag or a horn or something like that. But it actually took a while. We ended up filing a patent application on it, and something issued, but I think the industry went another way. But you can see that really the emergence of a technology is the spread of that technology through the network. Okay, this is actually a paper from 2014 I did with the RAND Corporation. This is the filing of applications in quantum dots. Okay, we can see the number of patent applications really started emerging in 2004, 2005. We get a nice, pretty logistic curve again. On the blue line is the number of patents that are filed in a particular year. On the right, we've got a graph, however, that represents kind of a sand chart that shows the spread of the technology through that network through time. Now, these are, there's a little bit of a lag, and that's why, this is an old publication or an old picture that, we've got a delay of 18 months. And so that's why that sand chart kind of goes down on the right-hand side between 2011 and 2012. It actually, graphene continues to go up, even probably flattening out now compared to then. Okay. This is actually a new emergence. We can take a look at, the emergences of words. These are types of things we can take a look at within academic journals, or we can take a look at in patent applications, or these are very similar to the techniques that the folks over at Google and Facebook and Instagram and everybody else in the day are looking to see what's ending up happening with respect to these emergences. And these are the types of things that you're going to be looking for, right, to try to affect the science in your area. You want to get on these curves early. You want to be paying attention to what's happening in the literature, even if it's just reading science news or getting some kind of a feed to see what's happening in your area. But you're not only interested in just what's happening in your area. You want to see what's happening in areas related that you can maybe move those, technologies in or move something in to try to make your growth in your technology easier. So this actually comes from a presentation that I did. We went over and we were working with Amgen out in Thousand Oaks, California. They ended up not hiring us because they've got campus full of people who've got PhDs in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they think they could do better. So that's fine. But we were taking a look at the number one profitable drug in this country called Humira. This happens to be a medicine that works basically with your immune system to take a look at, to help your body fight all sorts of things from eczema to, I think they're even looking at these types of things for like MS. And so we can see in 1992, Humira was actually, somebody filed a patent application for this. Our system would have detected an emergence in 1993. In the late 90s, Amgen had the ability to actually buy this drug and elected not to. And our story here was, look, we would have told you that this was important. And you can see down at the end on the lower right-hand corner, Humira's first patent has expired and the number of patents and filings have gone down in this particular technology area. So again, it's kind of, to get a logistic curve, really, we need a normal curve for the yearly filings. That doesn't always happen, but we still get this typical curve, and typically these curves last about 20 years. So to be early on these, you want to be in the first 4 years or so. Okay, this is another set of work that we had done for some folks over at Eli Lilly. They were asking us to look at, can you help us determine which drugs we need to take into our phase 3 trials? So a phase 3 trial for any particular drug costs $1 billion. They're very, very expensive, and if they can help themselves with looking at getting rid of one bad drug, then things work out. So actually what this is the network of clinical trials on different medicines in the areas of interleukin 17 and 23. There's tens of different interleukins. This was really kind of by way of example of what was going on. And the idea is, can we take a look at the network properties to determine, are there types or classes of medicine that some of your competitors are working on that you may be able to apply to work with it, right? Can you get a successful phase 2 or phase 3 trial to help inform what's happening with what you're doing? And we're using network approaches to do this, again, in some complex systems math. This methodology is technology agnostic. It doesn't matter. It's not just chemicals and bio or strange materials. One of the things that we were asked by was the folks over at Twitter. And Twitter had acquired a whole bunch of patents, and they also had some organic patents that were arranged for themselves. So what we do is we normalize the S-curves, and we took a look at the portfolios, and we actually, told them, look, you don't need to hire us because it looks like you're doing a good job. And as you can see, the patents that they're buying are actually, they're innovators and early adopters, so they look pretty good. So it looks like this organization is here. And so one of the things that we do is we'll take somebody's patent portfolio and put it on these curves to help help people determine where their portfolio is. So let's talk a little bit about innovation and your process in detecting emerging technologies. Really, you want to take a look at what your strategic priorities are. What's the problem set that your boss's boss is trying to solve, right? That's one of the things. Identify technology breakthroughs and enabling concepts that are not only in your area, but are in areas that are in the not too far other. Assess the emerging technologies. Again, that's, determine where they are in the S-curve, what's new and up and coming in it. And by the time it hits the New York Times, it's probably too late. I'll just put it that way. Forecast associations. That's really just trying to be creative, try to determine how I might be able to apply these technologies, and then integrate the new technologies into what you're doing, and then get it on paper, get it to your boss, get it to your partner, figure out what you're going to do, and think about trying to get it protected. Okay, so this happens to be a project that we just finished up. It was a major landscaping assessment. I can't really talk too specifically what was going on, but it ended up being discussed in a GPS jammed area. And so what are the types of solutions that may be available for it? And the idea was that there is no silver bullet for this, and probably it's going to be combinations of different types of technologies that we're going to use to look at it. So what I did was I built a network looking for enabling new technology solutions, and these were what we came up with. Each one of these dots represents a new emerging S-curve and technology. And so what we did is we looked into this network to determine, okay, what is emerging in another area? Let's just, by example, a computational model or an image data processing that can be used in one of these other topics on the right-hand side. Is there something happening in medical sciences that we may be able to apply to this? We were able to very, very quickly come up with a new solution, stuff that's hardware off the shelf, to hopefully get it. And I think we've got a customer who's actually going to be building a system based on what we recommended here. Okay. When we take a look at the new technology that's going to be enabling this new type of system, we're looking at technologies from all over the place. And so what you end up having is some very, very early technologies. These are things that are being worked at Lincoln Labs and the MITs and Harvards of the world. But we're also using things in the upper right-hand corner where you can see where you can use accelerometers or terrestrial signals or resilient satellite signals to try to do it where all of it. And the idea is when you're innovating, you don't want to just be working on the new stuff. You want to take a look to say, how can I apply the new technologies to some of the things that are going on in the area? Okay, so I promised Dave I wouldn't be too long. I'm going to talk a little bit about patent applications and really kind of what is happening. It's really not directly to the talk, but it's one of those things that I wish I knew when I was coming out of school. So again, I'm a patent attorney. I've been working in the area of patent applications for 25 years and a senior partner at a firm. One of the things you need to do and understand is to create value for your organization and for the companies that you're working for, you want to try to be the innovator. You want to try to think about these things. Even if they don't have a culture of patenting, you want to see if you can find an invention disclosure form and turn it in. They may not pursue the patents. They may not decide to do it, but at least that's going to hold you out to upper management as being an innovator and being important. So when she takes a look at you, she'll be able to pick up this thing that says, okay, Samantha's really smart and she's thinking. And I may not agree with this, or maybe we can make some changes and all of the rest of that. And that puts you really on the top of the heap with respect to getting things in. Older engineers, older scientists know these things. But if you come in and you're very, very young and you start filling out invention disclosures, once a quarter, once a month after a while, that's a good thing. You just need to put yourself in the mindset of what can we do to try to keep the ball rolling and protect the company's intellectual property. So with respect to patents, they've got a term. They last about 20 years from the earliest filing date of a patent application. There's some, a book full of rules that change this and that, but just think of it as 20 years from the date that you file it. We are a first to file country. So if somebody beats you to the patent office, they have the rights in the invention, and you don't. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to get ahead and get these patent applications in early. Patents are property. They can be bought, sold, or dedicated to the public. Dave dedicates things, or Dr. Sands, I should say, dedicates things far too often, but that's such as life. I try to counsel him against that anyway. This is a right that's granted by the government to you for advancing society and science, right? That's why we've got such a dynamic system in this country, is by giving you this quasi-monopoly right, and it's not 100% monopoly right, but to make sure that scientists and engineers are funded, or are encouraged, that we've got the system to do this. Generally, if you're employed, the company owns what you do. Now, there's always holes and loopholes and issues with respect to who actually owns it. Typically, you're going to sign an employee agreement if you're working for a larger, sophisticated company that has you assign your invention over to the company. One of the questions I always get asked is, what ends up happening is if I'm really into mountain biking, and so I come up with a new thing for my mountain bike, but that's not my job. Do I still own it? Well, that you have to get into a negotiation with your company, and if your job is doing physical chemistry, probably not. Your company's really not going to be interested in doing it. The other thing is really try to get a lawyer. If you knew the number of times that we had a pro se inventor go out and try to file a patent application and then really mess things up and end up losing everything. It happens every day in this country. So either have a lawyer help you draft your application, and you can find resources online to try to reduce the price. But you can also try to keep it a trade secret. And that is, anytime you come up with the idea, there's a whole body of trade secret laws for intellectual property where you can keep things and protect things a little bit. You may not be able to enforce it, but at least with respect to trying to have people stop stealing ideas if you give it to them. One of the things with respect to trade secrets is you need to keep it as a trade secret. You would need to have it, so if you're going to be telling people, they need to be signing non-disclosure agreements. The other thing I'd say with respect to patents is, if you're looking for ideas, or if you want to see whether something is done, we've got really great resources now at the USPTO with respect to online searches, but probably the best place for you folks to take a look is the Google patent search. They've got a really good search engine where you can go in and do keywords and take a look around and see. Just really briefly, there's another type of intellectual property called trademarks. You've all heard of it. Coca-Cola, Disney, these types of things. Really what it does is it denotes the origin of a good or a service, right? It's pointing to a company that's supposed to be giving a quality product and allows you to assign the reputation for a product. And so that's why if you think about eBay, and somebody might have a knockoff Patagonia or something like that there, one of the things you'll end up seeing or understanding is, well, that if it's a knockoff, the quality is not very good, and that kind of besmirches Patagonia's name if I thought that I was actually buying a real Patagonia zip-up. So you get your trademark rights by using it. You slap a little TM on it unless you register it. Registration probably costs about $1,000 at the end of the day. through time. All of these things are through time. Copyrights are a really complicated law. Copyright law is like the tax code. It's different if it's a statue, if it's a museum piece or a piece of music or a poster. But filings are pretty easy to do by yourself. They're inexpensive. You can typically, copyright software by sending in a piece of the code, and it's fairly inexpensive. I think it's less than $40 if you try to do it yourself. You need to prove somebody's stolen or infringed your copyright. You really need to prove access to your material and that it's similar. It's bound by, you can't get copyrights on things that are out there already. So for instance, you can't get a copyright on Boy Meets Girl Story. However, you can get a copyright on a new version of Romeo and Juliet or something like this, right? With respect to patents, somebody doesn't need to know about your patent to infringe it. If somebody comes up with the idea themselves and you're first to the office, they still can infringe it and owe you damages. And so that's really kind of the Reader's Digest and quick version of my talk. And I know there was a lot going on. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to hear them, either on patents or on innovation.
Wow. I have done so many things wrong. For instance, when I was a graduate student at Berkeley, something called a millipore filter was just invented. It can filter out all bacteria. So I wrote to the university saying we should file a patent on the use by backpackers who go into the wild country and they want to filter their water. And the university turned me down, said it'll never be used. Okay, so Chris, what's your comment on that?
Well, it's one of those situations where you can file a provisional patent application fairly cheaply. I think the filing fee is $100 if you pull it in and do it yourself, right? And then see if there's really a business interest. There's so many uses for things like a millipore filter, right? That one of the things you need to think about is if you're going to create a business, you need to be smart about it. You need to make sure that you do it right. Because I personally have been burned several times doing handshake type deals and trying to start companies with friends. So just be careful out there. And if your company doesn't want to do it and you're interested in doing it, you've got a passion to drive it forward, that's a situation where, start to develop it yourself.
So this course is all about passion. Everybody that has lectured has been very passionate about mankind and moving things forward. And I think you can see it here. What I see at the start of an S-curve very early on, like he showed with Humira, what you have to realize is a lot of people are saying that'll never work.
Right.
And there it is. They were saying it'll never work. And it kept that curve down for a long time until people realized it does work. So you have to be persistent. And the other thing I saw in this slide was, you got to read everything. And I think that's totally true. You have to be tapped in to all kinds of fields, not just your own field. So do you guys have any questions? What, this blew you away? Come on. Hang in there, Chris. There we are. I think this is going to be a political science type question. Judging from the past. Here we are, just hang on.
Thank you. All right, so I'm sorry if you answered this, but is there anything wrong with the patent and copyright laws that you would like to see change?
You know, it's interesting. The patent office is a political arm of the government, right? By and large, the examiners are very, very good, and really, what we need to help everybody is consistency. You know, there's a lot of folks who there's people who abuse the patent system, obviously, with respect to the price of pharma and the rest of those types of things, for life-saving drugs. So I think with respect to licensing and compulsory licensing, I think that that's one area that I think I would think that, you know, if we're talking about medicines and the government funds the research, for instance, to come up with it, at least some of that should be given back to the folks in the country. Now, you know, we don't have a solution to COVID right now, actually, but there was a time about 9/11, and probably you folks were, you know, infants or babies at the time. There was an anthrax scare, and Dave may recall this. What ended up happening was there was an antibiotic called Cipro, which would work for that. And basically, Congress called the pharma company before the House, and they were discussing, you know, are we going to have compulsory licenses for Cipro? You guys aren't going to, you know, if this ends up becoming a big problem. Well, it ends up that the anthrax was just a little bit of a scare, and it just was a couple of incidences, and so it wasn't all that important. But these are the types of things that I think when we talk about public policy, that's good. You know, so I weigh, how do I not get my invention stolen from me, which has happened to me on a number of occasions, right? My business partners have stolen from me, right? To what's the good for society, and we've got to balance it, right? There needs to be a balance, and I think we've got a pretty good balance right now. But one of the things is, if we stop enforcing our intellectual property rights in the United States completely, it's pretty tough for us to look over at China or India or even France, some of the, you know, known folks who will steal IP, and say, don't do that, right? We've got to be consistent, and that's really what I think.
So I look at that Humira curve, and I see the lower blue lines are the new patents coming along on the technology. And I'll try to say, let's say that's the virus, and that's COVID. And the new patents are the fact that as the virus moves along in the population, it can change, just like the new patents coming along. And that could very well happen here, is that the virus changes. And we're kind of hoping the virus will lose its virulence, because that'll make it more effective at spreading. But we aren't so sure about that. What's your comment there?
Yeah, so that's very, very interesting. And actually, the policy question we just got is very similar to what you're talking about. So one of the things is, if you make it more difficult to get some patents or some new ideas, that's kind of like social distancing or wearing masks, right? That's going to attenuate the curves. The same things that you see in the spread of a virus is you'll see on the spread on the network, right? If we close down academic transmissions, people aren't publishing, things don't speed up or go around. And then obviously the use of technologies, as you had mentioned, can go into bad things, right? You know, the first gas centrifuges weren't used to make weapons grade uranium, for instance, right? They were used for something else. And the application of technology can be for good or for bad, right? And so it's very, very similar to a biological network, where we're looking at, you know, stopping transmission, right? So, you know, did Chris not coming to Montana help prevent the spread into Montana? Maybe our lecture isn't as efficient and as good as if I was in there, and so there's a downside, but there clearly could be an upside for having somebody come in. Just like these public policies with respect to when do we allow patents to issue, when do we not allow patents to issue, do I not let, you know, so I'll give you an example. In China right now, with their Great Firewall, They're restricting some of the content coming in. Does that slow the movement of technology into their country that is going to allow them to do innovation? Right? Probably not, but it could be, right? And all of these are big policy type questions and issues. And I like mutations, Dave. Right? That's what makes the world better too. It's not that we always get bad stuff. So.
You are invited to come back out to Montana anytime you want.
Okay.
And we won't gut shoot you at the border. Here's a question coming up. Hang on.
So, do you feel that being a patent attorney has definitely helped in your study of systems, and like, are those two pretty connected?
Yeah. So it's very interesting because I never studied complex systems. Right. I'm a 53-year-old guy. Right. I was engineering mechanics and materials engineer. And went to law school at night. So. Really what ended up happening was, a desire to help really save some troops overseas that were getting blown up by IEDs and preventing surprise. That's what it was. And, I know how to code a little bit. I'm a pretty terrible coder. It's pretty ugly. But, I was able to write a scraper that downloaded the United States Patent and Trademark Office when they went online before they locked things down. And it wasn't illegal. I'm a patent attorney. I'm allowed to, touch the stuff over there. And then just looking for patterns. But that's, I wouldn't say that being a patent attorney leads me to systems thinking. I think I got that just by being an engineer and a scientist, and that's the way I'm wired. But it's we got lucky, right? It's not, there's plenty of folks out there with networks that don't behave this way. But when I worked with Professor Newman at the University of Michigan, he said, okay, I want you to test your network this way and that way, and is it preferentially attached, and all sorts of things that could work out, did work out, which allows us to do prediction and foresight, right? It's just like if you start to see an uptick in 7th grade, I've got 4 daughters, 7th grade girls being obsessed about something, that it's going to spread around, the Metro Detroit area pretty quick, and then die off. And it's all the same, or your COVID or chickenpox. It's very, very similar.
Okay. I have a prediction. I will predict that somebody in this class will do something with huge and high impact. Mm-hmm. And that's why we teach this class, is because that early part of the curve, where you are right now, the early part of the S curve, you need encouragement. You need to be taught that you've got the brain and you can put all kinds of things together, and you don't have to listen to the naysayers, the people in silos that are in one field or another, usually dampen the impact of their field. So do you have a question over here? No.
Yeah, so actually, Dave, to that point, when Google started off, they really loved patents. But Google hates patents now because the little guys are using them to go after them. And we did I got with the top economists over at Rand, and we did a study. Okay, Chris, this is really nice. You got these curves, and yeah, it's spreading around, but how do I know whether this is valuable or not? We went through and did an analysis of all of the patent litigations that I could get my hands on, and it was tens of thousands of them. And we said, okay, where is the money? Where's the value in the inventions? And it was all within the first 3 or 4 years of the patent, of the emergence. So if you're early on the curve, that's where all the money is. And all of the rest of the patents and all of the rest of the stuff that are happening in the curve, if you sue somebody, it doesn't even pay the lawyer bill. So that's, and I work with the Department of Defense. They don't care at all about value and patent litigation, but that's an indicia to them that that's value. That's showing that it's not only valuable here. So here's the other thing. These curves don't just happen in the United States, they happen all over the world. And so we can see when people are interested in new technologies or what people are doing really based on where they're placing their bets, either in patents or in academic journals.
things I notice in my own research is I publish a paper and nobody reads it for a while. You know who tends to read it? People in foreign countries. Okay? People who need access into a field. Somehow, I think in America, we're siloing too much.
Right.
But the people out there in a place like Syria or Pakistan or somewhere, they have to solve problems. And they're really looking into the literature, as does Chris, trying to find nodes of knowledge that might really help them. So young professors often, in order to get tenure, have to publish 2 papers a year. And most of those are dog papers. Okay, they aren't new ideas. They're just a little incremental step along. So one thing you want to do is find a professor that has a broader view, who is looking at more than one field. And that's really important, I think, for your career. But I could be wrong. Chris?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And the other thing that to think about is there may be 2 new emergences in adjacent areas. And you don't want to just incrementally say, okay, what if I apply this one? You want to try, what if I apply 2 at once? Because that's when you get huge, huge leaps going forward in all of these technologies, right? In Detroit, we're very, very hesitant to try to change things too fast because as an engineer in Detroit, you're taught not to get a recall. If you cause a recall, you're done, right? It's the worst thing you can do, okay? But you take a look at somebody like Elon Musk, and I'll be honest with you, I never thought that Tesla was going to work. I thought, boy, we know about how this works. But Elon Musk takes the best improvements from every field and smashes them together, right? That's how he was able to do controlled descent for his rocket launchers. That's how he was able to get, the autonomy added into his Teslas. That's how he was able to get the improvements in the batteries, right, to do it. So when Elon Musk says, I want to make an electric car, he didn't just think about the battery. He thought about the rare earth magnets that are needed for the motors. He thought about, what am I going to need to do? What's the data system I'm going to need to keep track of these so I can make changes to it, right? In Detroit, you got a controller, it's hardware, you never change it, right? Unless your engine goes bad. For Tesla, they're pumping new software updates to you all the time to get improvements in the system. And that's a different kind of thinking. He took what is the best that we can see with respect to adaptable control systems? What is the best we can see with respect to anodes and cathodes on lithium-ion batteries to try to get the improvements that they can get with respect to energy storage? And just picking one thing, at least you've got to pick something new to try to improve your product. But really, you need to think of it as a system holistically. And really, the only way to know that is to watch what's happening in fields around you, and not just around you. I cruise the physics journals and the bio journals and all sorts of stuff, just looking for scrappy new stuff to use. So, but actually, right now I've got a software that goes out and controls and looks for new emerging fields, comes back and says, this is what's emerging in this particular field. And then I kind of put it on the network and say, okay, where would this apply? How can we apply this to mining, or how can we apply this to COVID or what?
Okay, Chris, I just want to tell the class that on October 16th, we would like a 1-paragraph thing, and you'll see it on D2L, the more description of it, but it has to do with your final exam. And it is a 1-paragraph that shows you're starting in some way to formalize an idea that where you can spend $3 million and get something done. And so if you look into D2L, you will see that we're asking for you to submit. We will not grade it, but we will edit it, and we will ask questions, all towards the final exam, which is, as Chris knows, given $3 million, what would you do to help the world out using biotechnology? Thank you. Chris.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dave.